Welcome to Asian American Life. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo. Behind me is Radio City Music Hall, which is back with their Christmas Spectacular. So did you know that it was back in 1985 when they hired their first Asian American rockette, and it took almost a decade to hire the second Asian rockette? Well, I spoke to that dancer, Lainey Sakakura, who is now paving the way for the next generation of dancers. I'll have her story, but first, here's a look at what's ahead.
All in the family, 5 generations of entrepreneurs. Enough about me, MSNBC's Richard Louie on caregiving for his father. Plus, we'll have an update on the Children's Orchestra Society's recovery efforts. And lighting up the town where the streets are merry and bright. This and more on Asian American Life.
Lainey Sakakura, you may not recognize the name, but for the last 3 decades, she has graced some of the biggest dance stages, including the one right behind me as the second Asian American rockette. I met up with Lainey recently to talk about her storied career.
Lainey Sakakura and I met at a rehearsal space at Hunter College, high above busy Lexington Avenue. While this was her first time here, she's no stranger to a dance space. She has performed in several Broadway shows in the original cast of Fosse, Flower Drum Song, King and I, not once but twice, Chita Rivera, The Dancer's Life, The Best Little Whorehouse Goes Public. So many shows, she received one of Broadway's most coveted robes.
Still, we have 17 Asian American performers honored with the Legacy Robe. J. Elaine Marcos, Catherine Ricafort, Lainey Sakakura.
The Legacy Robe is given to the ensemble cast member with the most credits under their belt. Her professional career spans 32 years, a multi-hyphenate, performer, choreographer, producer, director, and writer. And it all began in a space like this in Oakland, California, where she was born.
I grew up in a dance studio. My mother immigrated here from Japan because a talent scout found her in Japan. Brought her to be a headliner in a club during the nightclub scene of San Francisco.
Her mom, Yukiko, also performed on stage. She played Mei Ling in Flower Drum Song opposite Barney Miller's Jack Sue. So it's no wonder her daughter didn't think twice about pursuing a career in dance.
After I turned 16, my mother and I took a trip to New York. I'd always wanted to go to New York. And I took my first class in New York, and I knew that this was where I wanted to be.
She landed in the big city at just 17, and the rest is history. She was living every dancer's dream. She danced with Ballet Hispanico on Broadway and made history with one of the most iconic dance lines in the world. Sakakura was the second Asian American to join the Rockettes.
After I got hired, I'll never forget my first day walking into that giant hall, and Setsuko Maruhashi was the first Asian American rockette, but not only the first Asian American rockette, but the first rockette of color. So she was hired in 1986, and then she walks across the room, and she says to me, I've been waiting 10 years for you to come.
The significance of her role made a huge impact on her then and today. She co-founded the Rockettes of Color alumni. Today, Sakakura is a vocal advocate of diversity on stage and behind the scenes. The veteran dancer, award-winning choreographer, and teacher says in many ways she's still trying to fit in, just like when she was growing up.
My first language was Japanese until I was 5, and then my parents stopped speaking to me in Japanese when I started school, with this idea that that would make me more American. Me not knowing how to speak Japanese did not make anyone stop calling me every name under the sun or throwing rocks at me or whatever, because this is the face I have.
While her mother was a Japanese immigrant, she's third generation on her father's side, and her family knows firsthand what happens when a country turns against you. Her father's family lost everything when they were sent to an internment camp during World War II. Despite deep roots, Sakakura still felt like an outsider.
We work really hard to divorce ourselves from our culture because we don't want to be seen as foreign. We're taught very early on that's the worst thing you could be. Still, we carry this face that we can't get rid of. It doesn't matter how American you are, you're still foreign to everyone else.
Sakakura eventually embraced her Asianness, but admits it took being cast in a Broadway show with a large Asian cast.
I started feeling more comfortable in my own skin. I started feeling this sense of family. I didn't know that I needed that until I was in it.
She also started to feel like she needed to branch out beyond dancer, a transition she says that has taken almost 2 decades.
I want to be that person. I want to be that Asian American female writer, director, choreographer. I want to be that person. I want to exist.
But life happened. She married a fellow dancer, Alex Sanchez, and her new role became mother. Now that her daughters are teenagers, Sakakura has been able to work on her next career, director, writer, and producer.
One of the most important things that I've done is adapt a book called Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet by Jamie Ford, a New York Times bestseller, one of my favorite all-time books.
It's a coming-of-age story told through the eyes of a Japanese-American boy and Chinese-American girl. And you could say it's a coming-of-age story for Sakakura as well, a former dancer taking that next leap, and you will remember her name, Lainey Sakakura. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo for Asian American Life.
오징어 게임의 세상 속으로 오신 참가자 여러분 환영합니다.
They're the heart and soul of Chinatown, family-owned small businesses that have been passed down from generation to generation and continue to thrive among a changing landscape.
In business for over a century, Wing On Wo is the oldest store in Chinatown. Passed down through 5 generations of family, the shop is now owned by Mei Lum, who runs it with family members from 3 generations, including her father, mother, and grandmother.
Wing On Wo was founded by my great-great-grandfather in 1890.
Located on Mott Street in the center of Chinatown, Wing On Wo is a cultural goods store that specializes in Chinese porcelain. The store is one of the many mom-and-pop shops that make up the majority of Chinatown's unique commercial landscape.
There are a lot of small family landlords that have been carrying these buildings through generations, like my family's, so that keeps the commercial storefronts, and that keeps an affinity to what the cultural fabric looks like here in the neighborhood.
Wing On Wo's thread was woven into that fabric at the turn of the century, when it opened as a general store that unofficially served as a lifeline for immigrants during the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Places like Wing On Wo supported assimilation, translation services, credit union, banking, job referral, housing referral, and just a safe place to reminisce about homeland.
In 1925, the store moved across the street to its current location, expanding to offer herbs, porcelain, and even roasted pig, straight from a pit in the back.
Then in 1964, under my grandmother's leadership, we ended up focusing more on porcelain and moved into more of importing from Hong Kong because of the US-China relations during that time.
Did you sell any soap?
Yeah.
Today, the shop mixes the legacy of the past with the possibility of the future. A future that was protected when Lum decided to forego grad school and take over the family business to keep it from being shuttered.
It's always been ingrained of like, you should do bigger and better things outside of Chinatown.
But there was no better decision for Lum than preserving the family legacy in a place she lovingly calls the family living room.
I grew up here in the shop at like 5 years old, coming and having dinner with my grandparents in the back. My grandma would be cooking. My grandfather would give me Cantonese lessons. And it would be a space where I could connect with my family and also feel connected and grounded here in Chinatown.
And that strong sense of community is central to the identity of Wing Am Wo, which also houses a neighborhood initiative called the WOW Project.
We want to be able to cultivate a space that nurtures and supports folks' community dialogue, the traditions of the neighborhood, and uplifts and amplifies.
The WOW Project has done just that by holding events which foster a strong sense of community that helps to resist gentrification and displacement. Although Chinatown is still reeling from the impact of the pandemic and anti-Asian sentiment, Lum says her family has managed to cope and even thrive.
Me and my family were forced to be resilient and think innovatively.
Moving most of their business online, Lum's dad and great aunt now run shipping, and her 90-year-old grandmother heads up marketing with her popular Instagram stories. It seems going with the flow is the secret sauce at Wing Am Wo.
We're not trying to open 5 more stores. We're just trying to keep our own store open, continue to support Chinatown.
To see all that Wing Am Wo has to offer, including their Lunar New Year annual Asian American Ceramicist Fair, visit the store's website, Instagram, or Facebook page at wingamwo.co. For Asian American Life, I'm Susan Jun.
I'm Kyung Yoon. 53 million Americans are family caregivers who take on the tough and often thankless job of caring for a loved one. For the past 8 years, television journalist Richard Louis has been one of them, and he spoke with me about some of the unexpected lessons he's learned along the way.
Hi, I'm Richard Louis, live at MSNBC headquarters here in New York City. Thanks for being with us today. We're going to continue next with...
Richard Louis is a familiar face on television as an anchor of MSNBC and NBC News. But when his father, Stephen Louis, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 8 years ago, the anchorman wondered how long would his own father recognize him. He determined to spend as much time with his dad while he could, and that was the beginning of a long-distance caregiving journey for Louis, flying back and forth between his home base of New York City and San Francisco, California, where his parents live.
I've been traveling back and forth, Kyung, for 6 years now, and put in probably 300,000 miles a year typically. It's obviously difficult, but I am so grateful that I've been able to spend 8 years with him living with Alzheimer's. My father comes from a brood of 13. When they got together, because they grew up poor, it was one fish with a lot of gravy and a lot of rice in their family. My father's siblings were tight as can be. His youngest sister comes up to me during the gathering 9 years ago and says, "Your father can't remember our names anymore." And that was the beginning of a long road of a stack of pancakes, if that's your brain, one by one being removed.
Louis says that as hard as it's been to see the decline in his once vibrant father, who had been a Presbyterian minister and a social worker, there have also been silver linings.
We have to go on walking now.
Thank you, sir. I've seen my father in the last 8 years all of a sudden love to say, "I love you." And love to hug each and every one of us. And love to say, "You're wonderful." And then forget that he's done it after 30 minutes. And then do it again. So there's also that idea of him dying in front of me, but also being reborn in front of me.
The other unexpected change that Louis saw was in himself, that in making hard choices like cutting back his work hours to care for his father and daily small decisions to put his dad's needs ahead of his own, he found joy and meaning in his life.
When we consider the ideas of caregiving or being selfless, that a dollar taken out of my wallet is minus $1, right? Instead, I think what I've discovered as a caregiver, sometimes it's 1 + 1 = 3. It's not a zero-sum game.
Louis began to see selflessness as a muscle that gets stronger with regular practice, not only when individuals are caring for loved ones, but in how they treat their neighbors and even strangers. And this led Louis to write a book, Enough About Me, The Unexpected Power of Selflessness, that was published earlier this year.
As we have lived through a very difficult time in our country regarding race, and we've all of a sudden been asked, when do I stand up for that person and how do I stand up for that person that's facing harassment just because of the color of their skin? It's a very similar dynamic. Once we learn how to act, that's a little bit more muscle tone. We get better, we get stronger at it.
Richard Louis says his father's condition declined further during COVID, and those days when he could hug and say, "I love you," are long gone. But no matter what the future holds, he says he is grateful to his dad for helping him see selflessness in a new light and to use his voice to champion the value of putting others first. I'm Kyung Yoon for Asian American Life.
I'm Minnie Rowe. Previously, we brought you the story of the New York Children's Orchestra Society that lost everything in a catastrophic storm as a result of Hurricane Ida. With winter fast approaching, we went back to see how they were faring since that devastating storm.
On the surface, it looks like life has returned back to normal for music director Michael Dadeb as he leads his students in rehearsals for an upcoming winter concert. But Dadeb says life has not been the same since that horrific night on September 1st, as he watched his life's work wash away in a matter of minutes.
Every time I hear that there's a flash flood storm, I get very nervous and I get traumatized again.
Deadly flooding cripples the tri-state.
Classified as a Category 4 storm with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour when it made landfall in Louisiana, the effects of that massive hurricane were felt all the way up the East Coast into the tri-state area. Dadeb remembers the storm took him by surprise.
It started very innocently. I was watching television upstairs, and the rain came down, and there was a flash flood warning.
Within minutes of that first warning, Dadeb's street had turned into a lake. Water rushed into homes, including into his basement that housed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of precious instruments, including 2 grand pianos, a childhood cello, thousands of scores of musical compositions, electronic equipment, nearly 4 decades of memories that can never be replaced.
My entire life's work was destroyed. I mean, that's not just me, my wife and my work together. It was completely destroyed, and the documents that we used for the children were unrecoverable. So this was tough.
The New York Children's Orchestra Society, or COS as it's known, has a long and rich history. Founded in 1962 by Dadeb's father-in-law, Dr. H.T. Ma, Dadeb's wife, Yo Chang Ma, and sister of famed cellist Yo-Yo Ma, took over the reins as executive director in 1984. Dadeb, a well-known guitarist, composer, and conductor from the Philippines, became music director, and together the couple weathered many storms, including COVID. But they say nothing compares to what they went through with Hurricane Ida, which Dadeb blames entirely on the effects of climate change.
Here we're teaching music, and we are trying to give them a better hope of the future. But then with this horrible events about the climate change, what kind of future do they have? And I kind of become sad about that.
Months later, the cleanup is still underway, and Dadab admits that some days it's a challenge to keep his spirits up. But he finds strength in the outpouring of support from his students, past and present, as well as his community who pitched in to help with the cleanup. Dadab says Ida struck a chord with everyone, and he especially notices a marked change in his students' attitudes.
But since the flood, you can hear a pin drop in the rehearsal. And that's amazing that I noticed. Everybody is attentive, and I'm touched.
After months of uncertainty, getting back to rehearsals is music to his ears, especially as the group prepares for a spring gala at Lincoln Center to celebrate its 53-year history. Dadab is determined to restore KAWS back to its glory days, one harmonious beat at a time.
Nothing can stop us. Not a disaster, not a flood, not anything, but we just have to continue on working together, learning music together and playing music together and sharing our music to anyone who wants to listen to us around the world or in our local neighborhood as well.
I'm Minnie Rowe for Asian American Life.
When Chinatown went dark at the start of the pandemic, business leaders and the community got together and had the bright idea of hanging lanterns to keep the lights on.
Last Christmas, hundreds of Chinese lanterns strung on Mott Street brought light to New York City's Chinatown, plagued by xenophobia and anti-Asian hate.
Chinatown was very pitch black dark during the peak of COVID because of all the storefronts that was closed and the street lights was broken. So for being pitch black, it didn't feel safe.
As the former manager of this bakery, Patrick Mock said he and other businesses watched their sales drop as much as 60% at the onset of the pandemic.
I wanted to bring something more festive and bright to the neighborhood too.
The lifelong Chinatown resident got community and business leaders to buy into the idea right away. Funds were raised online, and the local Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association, CCBA, saw its potential.
So the purpose we try to have, make the Chinatown a little different, more attractive at the evening, and I really, that's it, more invitation for people to come. Welcome, that we have light. They come here to see our light, you are welcome in our neighborhood.
Visitors started coming back, posting scenes of a lantern Chinatown on social media.
Traffic is slowing down for selfies. How can I say I see the impact of this project is, if I see a person on Mott Street or Bayard Street right now, taking a selfie in the middle of the street, trying to get themselves killed by a car, yeah, that's kind of me. Don't get run over by a car, but the selfies are great. Support the community, but just don't get yourself killed by a car.
It feels like I'm painting hope on humanity.
By adopting a lantern, donors can have their names hung in lights. Each lantern is hand-painted by volunteers like Jessica Chan, a lifelong Chinatown resident.
I love Chinatown even before the pandemic, but the thing is the lanterns really elaborated on its beauty. It made it even more, prettier, much more magical, much more welcoming than before. And I think it's the perfect timing since with the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes and what was going on during the pandemic, this is like the perfect remedy.
Why do you say that?
Because a lot of people, especially our community, they were feeling very hopeless and sad that people blamed us for this pandemic. They turned against us, and it was a way of us fighting back.
This is a community project, like I said. This kind of represents what this community looks like right now. One lantern doesn't make a difference. One light doesn't make a difference in this neighborhood. It's all these lights strung together within these couple blocks that makes the wow factor,
And the magic meant as a temporary installation will now be a permanent fixture that grounds this community.
We are going to put it up forever. And we are going to light up whole Chinatown.
This giving season, you can have your name on a lantern by donating at Light Up Chinatown's GoFundMe page. For Asian American Life, I'm Rainer Ramirez.
That's our show for now. If you want to learn more about these stories, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Asian American Life. I'm Ernabelle DeMillo, wishing you all a happy holiday.